Welcome everyone to our program, weekly program Shilpokotha, in its fourth episode. As you know, in every episode, we try to invite two creative practitioners to share their work and their creative journey in life. And today we have two exciting guests with us. We have Aqui Thami from India, and we have Stephanie Hanna from Germany. Hi, Aqui. Hi, Stephanie. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing absolutely fine. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Hi, Hanna.
Hi. All fine here as well. Thank you so much for this invite. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
Glad to have you guys. So this program is a weekly program that we do, and every time we invite different creative practitioners to share their stories and journey. And this week, this is you guys. So I'll start with Aqui. We would like to know where you are now and how you're spending your day in this new reality that we're living in.
Yeah, I'm in Bombay, and it's been difficult because Bombay happens to be one of the worst hit cities with COVID-19. And yeah, it's been really difficult to cope, mostly because my practice is working in collaboration with people majorly, and I've not been able to do that physically. So I've been like trying to find new ways to work. And yeah, and like it's been a struggle, but yeah, just trying to adjust to the new normal, I guess.
So are you like born and brought up in Bombay?
No, so I'm an indigenous woman. I come from the Thangmi people of the Himalayas. So I was born in Darjeeling, and then I migrated to the mainland of India when I was 15 years old. And yeah, so half of my life I've been living as a migrant in the mainland.
So do you go back to your community and are you in touch with them?
Yeah. I visit once every year, but yeah, it's like trying to be in touch with my indigeneity and myself is like an everyday process as well, like trying to decolonize the way I think and the way I present myself and the way I communicate with everyone around me, including nature and people. And yeah.
True. Coming to Stephanie. So where are you living now and how is the days there?
I'm in Berlin, in Germany. And the situation is pretty relaxed here. So we didn't get a full blast of cases, and we have the lockdown rules are also quite relaxed. So in my practice, not so much has changed, actually. I mean, it has. There's also one project which is in public space with people that has been postponed. But yeah, there have been also like government interventions, financial aids, which were helpful. And it's not my only practice. So I also do work with video and I write. And so I have lots of stuff to do. I have a studio where I have material works. I even had an exhibition in that time, which was not as well visited maybe as it would have been otherwise, but it was still very good to be able to do this. Also to, to have kind of these steps, right? These kind of concrete actions to do next, which are very helpful, I find, in structuring my life as a freelancer. And for the rest,
yeah. That's actually good. I mean, that's very different from, I think, India or Bangladesh or many Asian regions, that it's relaxed and you still can have the regular practice going on.
It is much more relaxed than before. That was what I was just going to get to, because sometimes this life is so stressed in such a competitive world. And because of the lockdown, there was like this general sense of ease. Don't stress, take a rest, take a pause. Reconsider, change your ways, maybe even. And that was, yeah, there needs to be, of course, a financial base for that one can take the rest and not totally stress out. So that was the lucky coincidence here with being in Berlin, with the situation we have as artists in Berlin, which is also a bit different than in the rest of Germany, and for sure different than in many other places in Europe and globally, yes.
True. So have you been always in Berlin, or you were living somewhere else?
I am born in Berlin, so I grew up here and started to study here also, but I moved to the Netherlands when I was 24, where I lived for 7 years. And I also spent some time, almost a year, in the Latin Americas, in different parts, but I traveled and worked in Nicaragua and in Brazil, and in Chile while I was still studying, yes.
So what you have been studying?
I did a BA in scenography, theater design, costume design, and stage design. And then I did an MA after some years when I realized, okay, this is not really my way of working, collaborating in theater, because there's a lot of unspoken hierarchies, especially like in the non-formalized, and so I did an MA in art and context, it's called in Berlin, which is more visual art, community-based practices, socially engaged practices, which I have been working in theater also in socially engaged topics and communities, but then I focused on coming up with my own projects, and they're kind of in theater and visual arts. They're,
Exactly. We can come back to that when we talk more detail into your work. We will see that journey coming from theater practices and then getting into community and getting into your own projects. So I'll come back to Aqui. Tell us about your background. Where did you started your, how did you started your creative journey, and where did it flew?
I guess I was always a creative person because amongst us indigenous people, creative practice is not really separated from the life that you live. So growing up, we were introduced to dance and music and visual art really early, but I never thought of it as the very Western or I don't know, professional way. But when I came to the mainland, I started finding it really comfortable to share with people creatively than having to put everything in words and give context of everything. So I actually started using art as a way to heal myself and people around me who also have similar experiences of historical oppression that we face every single day, and find ways to survive these oppressions. So everyone that I had around me, I kept coming closer to people who are contesting these hierarchies and trying to find ways to cope and just exist and even resist and thrive. So trying to create possibilities which are greater than the hurdles that are there for us. And in that I found that extremely brilliant, and and at the same time, while I was practicing that, it also gave me a sense of fulfillment because and healing, because it was definitely something that I was doing which was designed to keep me subservient, and so it was me trying to transcend that design and then create something else. I don't know if it makes sense. I know it sounds really
abstract. It actually does. Art is always a healing tool. You just need to figure out which discipline works for you as a healing process. I think that works for every one of us. I think Stephanie, me, and you both, we all understand it. And so I'll just let's look at your. I mean, I'd like to hear something about your works. Let's start with maybe Dharavi Art Room, or if you want to start even before from there. I mean, just give us a beginning activities, and then we go ahead.
Dharavi Ashram could be like a nice point where I actually started looking at it as a full-time thing, and I could not do something on the side and then do art as a side hustle. Like it became this thing that needed all of my attention and time. So yeah, let's look at Dharavi Ashram.
Yeah, so I mean, just a short brief about what kind of what kind of practices you were doing before Dharavi, like what discipline you were expressing or
Um,
engaging yourself.
Well, I am self-taught basically in the most academic and Western sense of things. So
Yes.
I did not really go to an art school. I went to a school of social sciences and I did a master's in Dalit and tribal studies. And then I got an MPhil in feminist studies and now I'm doing a PhD. But this is like my academic side, and I think like it kind of supplements the work that I do with the community in collaboration with people that I work with, because I keep looking for theory and try to imbibe them in the work that I do on ground. So yeah, these are pictures of Dharavi Art Room. When I started, it was a kind of a scary experience because having come from, like I said, like historically oppressed background, I always felt scared of working with kids because kids are the most vulnerable within the larger vulnerable group, and I did not want to create harm.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I said it really like cautiously and slowly, and then before I knew it, I was like into deep. Like the kids owned me totally, and yeah,
So can you give us a little background about the Dharavi Art Room, like where it is and how it
yeah.
functions, how it began?
So Dharavi is one of the densest places in the world. It is a small space in Bombay, which is a homegrown community made mainly by migrants who came to Bombay. They settled down in the indigenous neighborhood. Like the Koli community used to live there, and then a lot of migrants came and settled down, and they still do because it's an easier space to come and live where you can find people similar to you. And a lot of people who come and migrate and make Dharavi their home are also people who come from historically marginalized communities like Dalits or tribes who come from different parts of India because of the oppression that they have to face in the villages that they are. So they come and they start living there. Yeah, it's really active. There are people who speak so many different languages living next to each other, people practicing so many different religions living next to each other. And it is a super nice, healthy space. But at the same time, it's this heart of the city because it's like every single house is a production unit. There's something happening in every single house. It is amazing the kind of work that people keep doing in such small spaces. So yeah, the possibilities in Dharavi is endless, but because of the number of people that live there and because of the resources that are absent for kids, and like resources like playgrounds or like safer spaces where they can get together and not have to think about making things. Like I said, even their homes are production units. So a kid after school goes home and then has to like
Get
immediately
into the
get
production
involved in,
system.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, involved in the making chain. So that's not fun, like we can imagine. And
Yeah.
that kind of like being born in poverty kind of robs us of experiences of being children or being young, being teenagers. And that was really sad. And I could really relate to it because I migrated when I was 15 years old because of state sanctioned violence back home in Darjeeling. My parents wanted me to be in a safer space. So I could relate to what the kids were going through because I was not allowed to be a child anymore when I was 15. I had to be like a perfect adult and look after myself in the city,
Sure.
learn a new language, learn a whole new culture and all of that. So yeah, the idea was to create safer spaces where the kids can just come and experiment with art and just be happy and be children and have fun. That is how we basically started. And yeah, that was that was that was the main idea, and that remains to be the main focus, so that the kids have fun. Like having fun
Yeah,
is
that's
an
really
important
needed. Kids should be kids
part. Mhm.
in that period. And the burning question, of course, you get it from everyone. Maybe how do you sustain this kind of initiatives? Because I mean, we all start this kind of concern, real concern, when where you don't target products out of it. You just concern about a safe place,
Mm.
providing them something which is not commercial or sellable. So how do you
Yeah.
sustain this kind of initiative? How has been your journey?
It's extremely difficult when it comes to monies, and I guess that's been a struggle for all artists. Like artists who are not under the payroll of galleries and museums. I think it's been a major struggle forever. But yeah, like I mostly make work. I make zines and posters, and sometimes I paint, I make performances, and then like I get paid for all of these, and then the monies that are generated goes back into work in Dharavi. And Dharavi Art Room is also run by a bunch of other artists and friends who also come together and make sure that the space is open, because really it's really sad, but there isn't another space like this which does not come with an NGO agenda where, like, you have to fulfill certain numbers and like you have
Exactly.
to write reports. Dharavi Art Room is not a space like that at all. And over the years, it's been really great because the kids have started taking ownership to the space, the mummies have started taking ownership to the space. So we hardly have to do anything. The kids are taking care of the space, they're taking care of the young ones who come to the space, they're making sure that things are running in the space. If there's paper that I have to buy, if there's paint I have to buy, like anything, clay, whatever is required, they tell me what's required. And
Yeah.
so it's been pretty smooth and it's been nice.
And that's the beauty, I think, with community works. Once there is an organic formula in between everyone, it runs perfectly. You just
Mm-hmm.
have to work worry less for many things.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to Stephanie. How has been your journey, and how did you start it? Let's look at your beginning works. How did you start it, and how has it been?
Yeah, so as I said, I did study at art school, not the academic path, although I'm also very interested in reading academic writing and discussing and stuff, but I'm more from the art school formation. So when I came back to Berlin to do my MA, Art and Context here, it was very practical studies, and I had the outsider's view. Even though I returned to my hometown, I lived for 7 years in the Netherlands, had worked in Nicaragua in between, and traveled also to Brazil already once. And so I was wondering about the social situation actually here in Berlin is 4 million people. It's kind of a big city, but not as big as it could be. But it's very anonymous, and there's a strong segregation between the ages. Actually, the older people are often not very taken care of by the community and by the family. There's a lot of ruptures in families in comparison, for instance, with Latin America. But also even with the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, old people are biking in the city. They're very active, and biking keeps them healthy in a way. I don't know, that's maybe a stereotype, but they're sweeping the streets. And in Berlin, they're like stereotyping. I'm stereotyping now, but what I saw with that foreigner's look, I saw people like that are just complaining. Or that are very eager to get heard. And
Okay.
so that's why I developed my MA project basically on working with older people, and I was also very interested in street art and graffiti, which was booming in Berlin. There had been these exhibitions, and there was a lot of street art and graffiti, and it looked completely different than in the Netherlands, where it was all on stickers and very design. And in Berlin was more wild growth. It was more layered histories.
Yes.
You have that visual tradition in Berlin also, in which I grew up in the 90s. And yeah, the tradition
So
of
we'll
work.
look at some of the images of the graffiti and the concern with the old people, aged people, right? That is one of your beginning projects, I think.
Yes, that was my first bigger project into the art world. There's the pictures, right?
Yes.
That was actually in 2007. That was one of the first workshops. So I started this, practically speaking, in 2005. And there we were working in a youth center. So it was also a way of bridging this divide, or an attempt at bridging this divide. There were encounters with the people who frequented the youth center, and the people that took part in the workshops, they put their writings in between. Yeah, and it went on for many years. This was an action where we made a video for another screening also. And we met even the German president at a certain time, also around.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we were invited to have a kind of show performance at his garden. He has an annual garden party, and so then he came to visit us in the youth center, and we had a talk with him and his wife, which was really funny. But the German president is more a decorative function, actually, than like the chancellor. We have Angela Merkel, who is the powerful, but that president, he also resigned 1 year later. Actually, I don't know if it was because of us, but here we it could be. Yeah, I mean, the work is about shifting perspective. So that's also what happens to presidents if they start.
You just shifted the president.
Yeah, in his perspective, because I think he had to resign because he said that actually soldiers are potential. Wait, did he say that? I'm not so sure about the quote yet, but he said something either about economics, or he didn't say that soldier quote was somebody else, but it's a similar quote. But he said something about the economics, which was like something which is not to be spoken about by a certain group of people to which he belonged. He came from the economics, and also not in politics. So he, there was maybe he got wise in age, maybe. Yeah, so he just spoke the truth. Or he was tired of this position because he had to run around all day to fulfill this decorative position. But yeah, so you don't know.
Okay.
You know.
He definitely got wise. Okay. Okay.
Or he got tired.
Okay, we will look at the comment. Tracing a City, there is a comment for Aqui from Tracing a City. Dear Sadya, congratulations to you and entire. It's wonderful to observe the selection of speakers panel. If we may ask to Aqui, greetings from Calcutta. Hope you are doing safe in Mumbai. We're curious if you let us know how to access A5 issue and the experimental publication, especially from eastern part of Kolkata. And do you have plan to develop a new accessibility for visually specially able people in context of your sister libraries? Further reach out. Happy Pride to everyone. I think we're coming to that point where Aqui can answer this. So let's go and discuss about this designs maybe and the sister library maybe. Aqui, can you tell us about your sister library a bit? How did it started and how it is functioning now?
Yeah, can I tell about the zines first and then go to sister library?
Sure.
So I'm also a part of this artist collective called Bombay Underground, which is an amazing collective. We work with public interventions, reading practices, and a lot of different political interventions, collaborating with grassroots movements and giving them a visual side, because a lot of times grassroots movements are doing things, but then they don't really have anything that they are working on visually, because they also don't have funds. So we work together and then create things. So with Bombay Underground, we do the Bombay Zine Fest. We make zines, and yeah, we have fun. So that's how the zine started. And do you want me to show some of my zines that I have
Yeah,
here?
sure. Please do
Yeah,
show us. And can you tell us about like zine? How? What is a zine? Just for
so
our understanding.
right. So zines are just independently published work like this. So they are independently published works made by anyone. Like, you don't really have to be an artist to make a zine. This one is on biryani. I love biryani. And so it's like looking at biryani making as a community experience, and biryani as an archive. So yeah, and this one is a zine that was made in collaboration with the kids and mummies in Dharavi, and it looks at the history of migration of their mothers and grandmothers to Dharavi.
So the zines can take any kind of form, like small,
Yeah,
large, or it's
right.
just your independent stories.
Yeah, it does not even have to be stories. It can be poetry. It can be just a bunch of photographs. Yeah. Like this one has a lot of photographs that are taken by the women in Dharavi who were handling cameras for the first time. They were also school dropouts, and some of them had not even gone to schools. We also had an exhibition of their images, and then like this is an easier way for taking their images everywhere and sharing with people. So zines are independently published works that question status quo. So like there's a reason why they are independently published, because a publishing house will not publish content like this because it's not interesting to them, or it does not generate enough monies, or it's not their cousin's daughter, or like whatever family connections, or because they belong to a different caste group, or because they're indigenous. Like a lot of factors decide why your works
Not
get
serving their protocols.
Yeah. So basically, zines are independently published works that question the status quo. They also serve the function of establishing the connection between the maker and the person who is interested in the work, because most of the zines that are made are exchanged directly, face to face, mostly when it comes to zine fests, or like you already have like a niche audience who has been following your work, and then they want more of what you've been doing. So it's really a radical space where there is people get more interested in what you're doing, and a lot of zine makers also form uh, like artist run spaces and publishing houses where they exchange ideas and even facilitate for more people to make zines, because everybody should have access to art. Basically, the picture that you see on the screen is of a zine library that I made in London last year, and yeah, it was made in a not in use telephone booth, and we reclaimed that space because it was really not in use. There was just a notice that was put up, and then we printed a bunch of zines. I was working in collaboration with an artist-run printing press there, a Rising printing press, and a bunch of young aspiring women of color artists, and yeah, we made a zine library on the street.
Nice, exciting.
Yeah. So yeah, that's about zines. So, and Bombay Underground. So when I was like I said, Bombay Underground does a lot of reading interventions too. So we used to have like a lot of these reading spaces in the city. And while doing these reading interventions, I realized that people don't really read works of women, and it was really strange because they may not do it very consciously, but they're just not used to picking works of women because they think that it is not for them. It is not a general book that anyone can read, and it will be something that they'll not be able to relate to. And that was a really strange thing for me, a really strange idea for me to play with, and then I did just that.
Did you realize this? Did you realize this, that people are not reading things published by women or written by women in Indian context or overall?
Like, well, when I started, it was in the Indian context, because a lot of times people would be like, oh, wow, can you show me a zine that was made in, I don't know, New Zealand? And then I would give them a zine, and then they would just be like, oh, but this is made by a woman and it's not relatable to us. And I just would be like, what the hell? Or they would just ask me, oh,
Exactly.
is there a book of poems? Can you give me a book of poems written in South Asia? And I would give them a book of poetry. And then they would just be like, oh, but this is women's writing. And, it was always like that. And then it was really strange. And there has to be a reason why this was happening. And then I soon realized that we actually don't read women in school and in colleges. Like, it's
Exactly.
very few, like you can count it in your, like, the palm of your hands. And so it was really disturbing. And then I realized that we also don't have access to works of women, because when I started to keenly read women, I decided, like, because this is happening more and more frequently with every reading intervention that we were doing as Bombay Underground, I realized that I should consciously also start reading women more. So for an entire year, I read only women's works, and I also listened to only women's music, watched movies that only made by women, because I really wanted to reorient the way I was thinking, and also celebrate works of women. Because if I was spending time looking at others, like men's work, then it meant that I was, like, not using that time reading women's work. So I consciously did that for a year, and then I continued to read women's work thereafter. So I've been, like, reading women exclusively for the past 6 years now. And as I was reading, the collection of the works that I had grew larger and larger. And also did people who would ask me for books, because I would send them recommendations, and then they would be like, oh, can I borrow this? Especially with friends. And then I realized that people might be actually interested to look at these works, and I wonder if I can make a library. And then the idea got me very excited.
Yeah, so it was not only a practice that people were not, they didn't had resources, I think. So there, the sister library, I think,
I lost you.
breaks the boundary. I was saying that it was not only an intentional thing, also there was not enough resources of women to read, So I think sister library actually breaks the boundary. So let's hear more about it. Like, where did you do this, and how is it running now?
Yeah, I soon realized that people were excited about works of women. There were a lot of people who were excited about works of women. So in 2018, I received the Inlax Fine Art Award, which is an award given to emerging artists in India. They give you a small fund with which you can do anything. You can buy your equipment, you can rent a studio. It's 3 lakhs. And I decided to use that monies to travel with an installation of 100 books and zines to different cities in India. And then I traveled to 6 cities in 2018. And at the end of the year, when I was in London, I realized that, hey, wouldn't it be nice to actually have a physical space? And then I consulted with all these people who were interested and who were, like, really spending their time thinking and talking about Sister Library with me. And then they were super excited also. So we jumped into a crowdfunder, and the idea was to build a permanent physical space, because sadly we do not have a permanent physical space in India where women can go to. And so I started the crowdfunder in December, but we could not collect all of the monies. And Sadya, please link the crowdfunder so that people watching can send monies. So
we should.
But we could collect monies to last us a year, and we rented a space. And last May, we started the space. This May, we completed an entire year of Sister Library. But the idea is to have a permanent physical space where anyone can walk in and have works of women in such a huge quantity that is not, I don't know, that they can, like, look at and then they can choose from. So they are, like, works that are from, like, so many different kinds of works, from graphic novels to community published newspapers to art books to, like, fiction, non-fiction, poetry, like, name it. Like, it's, like, so many different genres. And then we also have a lot of different activities in Sister Library. We have the feminist free school, where we have a woman come and teach something, and the woman does not necessarily have to be from like a professional background. It's also sometimes a didi from the neighborhoods that I work with. So they come and then they can teach papad making or achar making. So I'm trying to like really reverse the idea of who's the knowledge keeper, who's a knowledge maker, how knowledge is made, and all that.
So you have multiple activities going on in between the library setups that you do.
I mean, like, there are monthly events, which we have not had since the lockdown because of COVID. But we have the feminist free school, we have community potluck. Because of a caste segregated society, we still have regulations around who can eat what and who can sit with whom when eating, and all these different things. So trying to break all of those things and create like a much open and healthier space for everyone to be able to have a glimpse of what it means to be existing freely. And yeah, that is my special space. Oh. And then like we also travel to many different places, because traveling is so fundamental to Sister Library. Since I told you we started with traveling, so we traveled to Auckland. That was our first international travel, and now we have a bunch of books in another community-run library called the Samoa House Library, which is in Auckland in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and then another sister library installation at Dhaka, actually. So there, yeah. So I traveled to Dhaka too.
Nice. So we will come back to Dhaka scene. We go back to Stephanie. We need to hear her works also, because like both of your works, I think both of you guys work very excitingly. Stephanie, how are you doing? It was a lot from Aqui, right?
Well, but it was so interesting, and I can relate to so many things. Like
exactly.
Yeah, also this what you just mentioned, Aki, the questioning of where's the knowledge coming from. That was exactly how I worked in the senior street art project I presented. And also this, actually one of the reasons why I turned to older citizens or older people was also that I can learn from them while I'm giving workshops. And I was also working in schools, and one thing I loved to tell the children is, look, I'm here to learn from you. And also through that kind of invite shifts of perspective and maybe also different understanding of
exactly
how knowledge emerges maybe more in a communicative process rather
than exactly rather than one stream, focusing on one stream learning. It's like multi-streams, and you can choose and you can widen your learning process.
Or knowledge is not what is kept in the books, right? The books is written down, maybe sometimes also what have happened in communication and in these interactive processes. But this is where knowledge happens, actually, in my opinion. So not only in my opinion, I read also something about that. So books are good.
Yeah, we can be. So I think there has been a research in your practice, like knowledge, searching for knowledge or alternative learning, and then research process. Let's talk about your work, the market research, maybe. I think
market research.
Yeah, let's hear about that.
Yes. So that's an interesting question, because what is the research about market research? Do you want to show the images while I talk about it, maybe, so I can talk
the video?
Maybe just the photos that you have. Do you have the photos?
Yes, sure. The market, what we mean by the market, maybe.
The starting of the market research. So because coincidentally, also while I was coming to an end with the senior street art project, I got the chance to work in this department store window, which was a kind of more semi-public art practice, because I was kind of the fish in an aquarium or something like that in there. And people walked outside and watched me while I was shifting constellations of objects. So this is the 4th series I did there. I started with my own furniture that I inherited often from my family. And from that inheritance, I also derived questions while shifting the constellations and looking for shifts in interpretation. I invited more and more inheritance we leave behind, maybe unconsciously often, which is plastic packaging. And so it was a mixture between plastics and furniture. And this is the fourth series, which is like only plastics. And I build worlds out of plastics. So I invited also other artists to intervene in my orders. I questioned my orders. That what I did before with participative work, working with people in workshops where I invent, okay, we can do that. And then the people do it completely different than I thought. And now I worked on my own, but so I was missing that, throwing around my order. So I invited other artists to throw around my order. Yeah, and then this built up. This was like 2016, and this built up. And then maybe we can come to the video, because then, like, what you don't know is that I'm half American, and the election of Donald Trump deeply affected me. So,
yeah, you keep going on. I'm just playing the video. Can you hear this? Yeah.
So this performance I did a day after his inauguration, actually. And as you can see, I document a lot of performances when I shift the objects, and by various perspectives also. This is an editing, but in this market research, so the research was, I had this department store window, and I was showing objects which were like old, thrown away. Like my inherited objects are usually given to me by my living mother, who doesn't want them in her apartment anymore. And it started with a table which was too big for my apartment. So I had to cut it. I had to kind of cut it because it didn't fit. And then I went on and it became art. And so this, like, hey, how are we dealing with each other? And this surface orientation of selling things and buying something new and never using what you have or recycle or renovate. I mean, there's a shift now. But this work, I started this series like 10 years ago, and that was now 6 or 4 years ago, that last part. And I hope so much that this shift, because we don't have so much time really to be, to learn to take care of ourselves and the world
and each other.
We co-live with the world to get to that understanding also, which is very present in a lot of indigenous communities, which are being threatened by the extractivist, consumerist exploitation that many, many huge parts of this population here is really unconsciously doing, and not really unconsciously, but in an ignorant way, I would even say, just like ignorant, because it's more comfortable to be ignorant about the pain we are doing to the world when we consume like that. Actually, the pain we do to ourselves, and it might be very painful to feel that, but we have to, that's what, for instance, Greta Thunberg says. She wants us to panic, right? Which I think it's not the last, it's not what the end result. I think she says it also, and it's just to wake up. And then when we realize the panic, we can start to take care.
Yes, we can, unless we realize it, we can't work on it. We can't heal it. So that's true. I think from market research, we have another work coming from the same practice. Can we look at that, and you can tell more about that also?
Is that this year's?
The contemporary
constipation?
Yes.
Yes. So I am painting these plastic things for 10 years because like 10 years ago I had little money and I had to buy cheap food, and cheap food often comes in plastic packaging. So before I was able to buy at biological market, you can avoid all that plastic, but suddenly my house was filled with plastic packaging. and in order not to be angry about maybe my impotence in a way, in that regard, to like I can't. You have this Ohnmacht, this beautiful German word that I don't find the English relation for, but it's like this is like the powerlessness, like the helplessness. Yes,
Yeah.
and like, well, how can I tackle this? Does it make a difference? And then to find that I can make a difference for myself, for my own life, and in that the difference will radiate through energies. It makes a difference if I'm happy in my life, not in a consumerist, egocentric way, but by transformation. So this is also a work of transformation. And I do believe in these needle points, in these acupunctural points that every single person can do. And we need to empower each other to do what we can to make a change, because we can't expect it from the politicians. And yeah, so this is my rant here.
These are lovely. I'll just go through each of them, and you can tell us more about this, maybe.
Well, yes, they have stories, right? They do.
Yeah, so let's hear this story. What is the story here?
Well, I mean, I don't know the stories. The thing is, I listen to material usually, right? So I listen to material, and I don't want to interpret. I don't want to impose my story on this. So the thing
and I guess all your materials have eyes, most of them.
Yes.
That's what I can see.
Yes, because this is, I don't know why, but I don't know why I started painting the eyes on. I started painting eyes on these packagings 10 years ago. So maybe there's also a link back to that senior street art project, where that was a very easy way to engage people in looking at the world differently. Like, look around, where do you see faces in the streets, right? This was kind of the workshop thing I asked. And so maybe from that, but in the end, after I watched my own work and listened to my own work, I realized maybe these eyes are like the subtitle for this exhibition is "The Plastic Stares Back." The eyes are there because this plastic, it tells us something.
Stares back at us.
It doesn't want to be discarded. It tells us something, and there is a need to listen. The thing is, why I don't know these stories. Also, I think it's harder to listen to plastic packagings than, for instance, to an inherited table, because so I try to find this line of not interpreting but discovering, which it's a different. So the thing, about the discovering is that I am surprised. So
exactly.
The object changes me also. It's not me who imposes something on the object. So this, I also find it's talking to me a lot, this thing. And it doesn't have a clear message. And I always look for these moments when things do not have a clear message, but there's possible trajectories from, like, incentives, like to really get more fine-tuned to the different levels of coexistence.
Right. Like, it's really interesting, like how things are appearing to you. You're not imposing too much from your side. You just let it be natural, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I do paint them, right? Because this is what society wants me to do. They want me to produce things and make exhibitions. Otherwise, they don't accept me as an artist. Then I would just be a crazy person.
So true. So true. Okay, let's come back to Aqui. What do you think about that?
Yes and no. I mean, like, I have always been, I don't know, like I always feel weird about exhibitions and making, because like I said, I have been a student of feminist thought, and that has been already broken by our feminist foremothers when talking about art practice and feminist art practice, especially, like, you know, having to make exhibitions. But then, like, again, we are living in a capitalist market oriented society, and we have to live, we have to get monies in order to survive. So yeah, it is a trap. It is sad, but it is a really big trap. Even after there are like so many big movements that have already questioned the aspect of art making when it's almost treated like production, we like, there still has like been nothing that has been able to break the capitalist nature and the elitism of art practice. And yeah, it's rather sad. It is totally co-opted by rich people.
Okay, you still need the funders. Okay, okay. Just
I
let's
have
not
no
go deep.
funders. I fund myself.
Okay, let's quickly hear about your another initiative, Sister Radio, I guess. Very
Right.
quickly. Yeah.
So, Sister Radio is something that I started doing with the pandemic starting and us getting locked down. Because I will go totally insane if I don't work. So I have to like use my time working. Otherwise, I'll be too focused on how everything in the world is breaking and the world is on fire and nobody cares. So yeah, to save myself from that, I again employed art as a way to heal. And I thought, hey, well, I had been thinking about making a podcast for a really long time, but I also did not have time because I've been like dividing my time into so many different things. So this came as a blessing, where I could connect with the sisters that I have met over the years. Thankfully, because of my practice as an artist, I've been able to travel quite extensively, and I have met a lot of indigenous women of color, amazing women doing amazing work, but again, not really getting the recognition and the credit that they deserve, and not being celebrated in the mainstream, because all of us know why, right? So I created this platform where we can talk to each other, talk about each other's practice, and like celebrate their work, and use my platform so that people who like what Sister Library has been doing can connect to works that these women have been doing too. We are really young. We just have 2 episodes down. We release episodes every full moon and every new moon. So we're dropping another episode tomorrow. It is on all podcast streaming platforms, and it's also on SoundCloud for people who don't have Spotify, Apple Podcast, and other platforms, access to other platforms. Please make sure to check it out. And when you do check out, please make sure to leave us a review, heart us on SoundCloud, rate us on Apple Podcast. It's so important, because they are people who are seeking to listen to these voices that have been pushed to the fringes, but because we don't get enough ratings and we don't get enough reviews, people can't discover us. So yeah, please, it literally takes a second for you to review, so just like hit that stars.
Sure.
Yeah, and that is
sure
also,
many people will check.
yeah, and that is also something which is accessible to people who are blind and people who are visually challenged, whichever word you're comfortable with, whichever idea you're more comfortable with. So yeah, that, and we've also been trying to make transcripts for Sister Radio to make it more accessible to people who are deaf or people who are living with hearing disabilities too. So yeah, please.
So I guess on that note, I will connect with the question that Racing Air City left for you, that how you're planning the accessibility in your sister library for the visually specially able people.
Right. So for visually challenged people, we have been thinking about Sister Radio, obviously, but also reading circles. We have a lot of reading circles where we invite people to sit together and like read. There's been a lot of reading that has been happening also in Bangladesh, which is done online now because of the lockdown. But even in this space, in the physical space, we have reading circles where people sit and read and of course, everyone is invited, people with disabilities, people without disabilities, to sit and listen and read if they want to read. But because we are also an independent space, it's hard for us to get Braille and other things in place. But I'm happy to get contributions and donations coming from people who have these resources. So yeah, if you know someone, link us.
Don't look at me. Okay. So the reading sessions are happening mostly in Mumbai and some in Bangladesh, right? And I think in Bangladesh through German Culture Center it is happening, or some other platform?
At the Gatti Institute, it's happening. Like they host online readings with Sister Library. So they propose a text and then they invite people to come online and read the text. We usually do this offline though, because traditionally reading was a community activity, but then because of the capitalist boom and the production that the presses started making, there was more access to books, and then it became entitlement, another form of entitlement, where richer people would hoard books and then poorer people would not have access to it. So I'm trying to reinculcate the idea of sitting together and reading, and that way you'll have so many questions that you can question together and find answers together and have a laugh together. And reading does not really have to be a solitary activity. So I'm re-looking at that idea also, because oftentimes when people think reading, you directly connect it to excess, right? You need to have space, you need to have a quieter space, you need to have light, you need to have the ability to read, you have to be literate, you have to have access to books, and all of these things. The picture that it presents is oh, you have to be rich in order for you to read. So a lot of people, me and a lot of people that I work in collaboration with, have never had access to these things. I grew up with the power being disconnected for 40 days and 50 days, and we would have no electricity. So how do you read then? So really looking at the idea, looking at the thought and trying to break it.
Yeah. So Steph, I'll just connect Stephanie again. Do you connect yourself through any work based on audio experiences?
Yes,
can
sure.
you share of your experience?
Well, I mean, that's a whole other thing, the audio. Because I started questioning the dominance of the visual image a lot because the Senior Street Art project was very media successful. So media wanted to reproduce the image. And so I started to wonder why we like to see always the same image. And that's how I shifted to audio. For a long time, I just did street collections of advice for a good life on the streets. And I do work with readings of books. So as I mentioned before, I like reading a lot. And I do kind of summaries. I read and then I edit by re-listening, and I put it to other video observations of social situations and make videos out of that. Now for the Nordic Summer University, I made one on a book by Hartmut Rosa, who's writing on acceleration and alienation, and also in relation to late modern temporality, which is speeding up. So I can relate a lot. And actually during the pandemic also, reading, I was in a reading group online also, which was bridging from Vancouver to Berlin, and we were reading a book, Bio-Insecurities by Neil Ahuja. I don't know if you heard about him. He's a Canadian scholar, I think, or US American, I'm not so sure. But we were reading it from page 1 till the end, and it's really a scholarly research on pandemics and the related racisms and other structural oppressions that can go along, bio-insecurities. And that was so, I mean, apart from the content, just to meet each day and to have that date, we meet at 6 p.m. in Berlin, 10 a.m. in Vancouver, and we read. That helped us through the first weeks of not knowing and craziness, just to, even if it's online, to get together, and see faces.
Exactly. Yeah. Nice. So I
Yeah,
see
we
both
have
of you. Yeah, okay, go on.
we
Yes.
have a book club as well. It's called Reading Women Book Club, and then every month we read a book, and then we have a discussion. Like we used to have it physically, but now because of the pandemic, it has become a global book club.
Which is
And then
good,
we have
no?
yeah,
Something became global, at least.
yeah,
Not only the virus.
yeah. So join you too also, and whoever's interested, please write to us and join, and you get to read a new book every day, every month, and then like have a discussion with different people.
Nice.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. And yeah, let's
Well,
join that. And I think I'll look at the comments again. There are a couple of comments coming in. Ilyas Ahmed is really excited. Wow, nice creativity and innovation there. Congrats, Sharif. Okay. Mitali Nath, patrons, funders, ha ha ha. I guess it was me and Aki when we were talking. And wow, love this idea of community reading. Congrats, Aki. And also Stephanie. Oh my God, that's grand. I think it was during this community reading and online reading sessions we were discussing. So pretty exciting that everybody is joining and commenting. So I think we're almost at the end. I'll just want to know the footnotes from you guys. How this, I mean, I already get the picture. We already get the picture that how this pandemic is actually shaping different dimensions in your practice, like getting online and like getting into audio practices and reading, getting in an online session. But is there any other changes that is coming in your personal life that you think will stay longer in your practice or your personal observation due to this, new normality? And how do you look at the new future? Maybe I'll start with Stephanie again.
Well, actually, I'm taking up a course on healing. yeah. So which I'm already doing my work, but now I'm taking up a course and maybe become like a professional in that field. Who knows? I think
Okay.
it's the thing which we need to focus on now, right? And so we see where it
I'm
goes.
sure.
Whether I continue to weave it into my artistic practice or start doing one-on-one sessions as well, we'll see.
So I have to call you, like invite you in another session to see how expert you became with the course. Maybe you can suggest more in depth in the situation.
Then maybe in half a year, right? Then give me some time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. So let's stay in touch. What do you think, Aki?
I think that it's going to get more and more difficult for people here in the global south and for the global majority people. And things are going to get really difficult, even in terms of exchange and collaboration with the global north, in terms of visas and traveling. And it's high time that we all wake up and try to really look at ways of healing together and addressing problems that are systemic, because these, like COVID, would not be such a big problem if we did not, as countries and as nation states, did not spend so much monies on building our army and had no monies that we put into healthcare. So it's really silly that like we have to live by the rules that are created by a certain group of men, and we have to put our monies into fulfilling their fantasies and that stroke their male egos. So that has to be re-looked at, and there has to be an idea of care that takes the front and the center of every decision that is made, because we have to, like, the only way we can escape all of these, especially in the global south, is through care and commitment to the community. But I don't really see that happening because we still have structural issues and like problems, and these structures like caste in place. So without dismantling these, it's going to be very difficult. So I don't really see a positive future it's going to get more and more and more difficult, and I'm scared. It makes me sick.
Yeah, I think it's more scary for us who are into community practices, because it's all about gathering and connecting and spending time together. And this pandemic is changing the core of it.
Yeah,
The distancing and isolation. How do you think we are going to cope up with that when we are actually concerned about the community engagement and learning from them?
Yeah, concerned about things that are so basic, like food. Like when the lockdown hit us, and like I said, Bombay is one of the worst affected places in the world. And when the lockdown started, our first focus was food. We have to get food for the kids, otherwise there's like starvation. The kids are dealing not only with having their parents at home, and a lot of different kinds of abuse, and like the COVID, and having to use public toilets, not having enough water to wash their hands, all of these issues, but also not having enough food because their parents were laid off immediately, no monies were given to them. And yeah, so these are scary times for us, and there is no redressal, there is nothing. Like nobody really cares, and it's getting, yeah, it's getting
I
more
think
and
that
more.
I think the same realities have been in Bangladesh, from where I can see it. Food scarcity, and also there are a lot of corruption. Even if you have enough food, it is not distributed; it is corrupted and everything. So the reality gets harder. I mean, you care about human, but the reality is getting harder by human itself sometimes
Yeah.
in the system. So I'll just want to finish coming back to Stephanie. How the support system for cultural practitioners has been in Germany, because I mean, from our part of the world, we see they at least count the cultural practice as asset in the country, not like ours part. Like we're just least on the list, like the last number, or even after the last number in the list when it comes to aid and support to sustain. So how has it been in Germany in terms of your practice? How do you see the situation there?
Yeah, I mean, we are kind of the one of the countries who profit, right, of the global unbalance we live in. We are a country which exports, for instance, weapons. So part of it's not the biggest part of our export, but part of our export is from making war in other places, which we are not directly affected by. But I'm sorry, I'm sidelining your question, but I had to mention that because it's part of the economic, like how much a country spends on which part, right? And so
Exactly.
we do have also high military expenses, way too high, but there's a discussion of cutting them. And there's also the police discussion here, and the cultural expenses, there's also, it's better. It's better than in many other countries. It's also better than in other countries in Europe where the cultural funding has been cut. And we, especially in Berlin, have a very lucky situation that the Berlin art scene is very politically active, directly engaging and talking with the local politicians. In the rest of Germany, it's not always everywhere the same. Or, I mean, people are active, but they're maybe sometimes not as successful with the politicians. But there's a lot of petitions that are also directed not only at artists, but at other small freelancers who are struggling to survive the pandemic. Not only artists are affected. So I think it's also important to, from German perspective, my perspective, to bridge that gap between, okay, I'm not a propagator of cultural elite. I would prefer a society where I have the same wage like a plumber, like a doctor. So,
Exactly.
yeah, and a living wage, just a living wage, just give people a living wage. But we are lucky here. Yes, we are really lucky. For us artists, it's really been, because we usually, most of the artists are not very rich, so they know how to survive off little money, and we can manage with the help we get here, which is not a lot, but it's, we got
at least there is something. Yeah, at least there is something to support. Yeah.
Yeah, we got 5,000 euros at one go just as a like, and for me that's really, I can comfortably save myself. I could save myself for 6 months.
And that makes 2 more sister libraries, doesn't it, Aqui?
Yeah.
That's the budget for 2 more sister libraries, literally. So
good. Yes.
We have different realities in different parts of the world, and like, good that we can share that in this program. It was really lovely to hear both of you, and lovely to have you with me. And yes, sure. So I'm sure after 6 months, I'm going to call Stephanie again, and Aqui, please join me to see how we can heal ourselves better through a better expert with us. We will quickly look at the last piece of the comments. Mitali Nath is still with us. Okay. Yeah, so her comments are going through the conversation, so it's hard for me to actually say when did she do the comment, but it's like, I'm so enchanted with the spiritual cleansers of Ecuador. Through that, lovely. Thank you, Mitali Nath, for being with us, and Ruby Kamokar Ganguly, Ilyas. There is Tausif Munor with us. So there was a couple of people who were with us all through. And thank you again, guys, and hope to see you again. And take care. Keep us updated. And keep up the good work.
Bye,
Thanks.
Stephanie. See you soon. Bye.
I hope to see you. Yes. Ciao.
Ciao.